r/ask Reddit. What is something about yourself that sounds totally made up but is 100% real? A pelican engulfed my head with its massive ducking beak when I was a small child. Pelicans are dunce. Pelodonts. I ran out of gas outside of La Paz, Bolivia. Luckily it was downhill for about 6 kilometers into the city. I coasted the whole way on my motorbike, past buses and drifted into a gas station. Never missed a beat. Sounds like you saved a liter of fuel to me. At age 50 odd and with limited to no video game experience, my mother completed Mario 64 before I did, in about half the time it finally took me to do it. When I was a kid, I woke up to find my cat giving birth to her kittens on my pillow, 1 inch from my face. I took it as a compliment. It totally is. That's like the Cat Congressional Medal of Honor. I was once sponsored by the Crunk Energy Drink Company for sailing. I imagine I was the only sailor on their list. I literally just emailed them saying that I sailed and asked if they wanted me to put stickers on my boat. They sent me a few cases of the drink, t-shirts, hats, the works. My car was known as the Crunk Mobile. When my mom was in grad school she took several labs where she worked with cadavers. Because my dad worked nights she often had to take me to class with her, and she'd usually just plonk me down on the table with the cadaver while she worked on it. Can I go to work with you? Over my dead body. I saw the former Prime Minister of Poland in his underwear. That's not how the rhyme goes. I am one of very few people outside World War I to live through mustard gas. So rare the doctors, 1995 no internet, had no idea how to treat me. I got hernia by sneezing too hard. One of my ancestors was dumb and bought one of Napoleon's doorknobs. It turns out it's fake. Doorknobs were invented after Napoleon died. I'm intrigued by the fact that this is the story that your family decided to pass on from one generation to the next far enough to lose track of the relation and just refer to the subject as ancestor. Once in college I applied for a job at the library help desk. I figured I would help people find books. Didn't give it much more thought than that. During the interview, I aced all of the customer service questions. Then they asked me whether I knew how to defrag a hard drive. Cue alarm bells in my head. But I kept calm outwardly and said no. But you can teach me. I worked in IT for 3 years by accident. They were too nice to fire me. My great-great-grandfather was a Pinkerton detective, acted on vaudeville, and had 5 wives in 2 different states that knew nothing of each other. He also slightly changed his last name each time and never got caught until Ancestry website happened lol. Sounds a bit like my great-grandfather. He had a wife in France, and then 2 in the US and neighboring counties. He was caught though. My great-grandmother was wife number 2. She found out about wife number 3 and divorced him. No one knew about the first wife in France until I pulled his service records from World War I. I once successfully ran an unfunded shelter for 100 homeless veterans, as a homeless civilian. I took my mother for a surprise trip to NYC. She got married to my father there in 1968. The surprise was manufactured by way of telling her we were going to Australia. We live in New Zealand. So a trip to Australia is not a huge deal. It's the type of thing you could do for the weekend, and therefore she packed a bag and brought her passport. We got to the airport and said surprise, we're going to New York, and she cried her eyes out with delight. When we arrived, on our first morning, I said okay, what do you want to do? She said when I was last here, in 1968, the Twin Towers weren't complete, so I'd like to go to the top of them. Your wish is my command, I said, and off we went to the WTC. That was the afternoon of the 10th of September, 2001. Suffice it to say, there was a particular poignancy when we looked out the window at around 8 AM the next morning. I've been in 3 fatal train accidents, never had a scratch. Found the star of Unbreakable. I was baptized by a serial killer. Well, you can't just bloody leave us at that, man. Arrested and spent 3 days in a holding cell for a crime that I didn't commit. About a year after the whole matter was done and dusted with. Mind you, I say didn't commit a crime, but I was involved in the story from start to finish. My family ancestry can be traced back to a court jester who served in the court of King Jacob IV of Sweden. Whenever someone calls you a fool, you're just carrying on the legacy. I beat anorexia. I'm a guy and I do not have photos of me from that time, due to shame, so I have no proof. I have gone from 70 pounds to 130 pounds. I once won a $500 raffle during a routine visit to my local tea shop. It was the building's annual Black Friday event and there were 5 baskets with varying amounts of goods, services, and coupons. I needed tea, so my only stop was the tea shop. It cost me $20 to fill my tins, but they said raffle tickets were given out after a $25 purchase. I said duck it and got a hot tea for me and the woman in line behind me entered with that one ticket. I got a call a few days later saying I won the top prize basket. When I went to claim, they asked about my purchases. I told them and they said the drawings had over 1,000 tickets and many people had over a dozen entries. The raffle prize included $25 to the tea shop. I have won an actual WWE match. Spent a really cool day in London with Christian Slater and his mum. His mum is adorable. I found out my father wasn't my biological father in 10th grade biology class. We were learning about blood types and traits. I raised my hand thinking I was a smartass. Your chart isn't accurate. My dad has AB negative and I'm O positive. My teacher said I think your mom has some explaining to do. And we all chuckled. Turned out, he was not my father. I have phytophthirmatitis, which is a big fancy word for I can't get acidic juices, lemons, limes, apples, oranges, etc. on my skin and go out in the sun. Turns my skin brown like a rash. Doesn't hurt or itch, just discoloration. Happened 3 or 4 times in my life. My dad kidnapped me and took me to Singapore for very malicious purposes. I'm sure you could imagine. I was 15 and my dad literally had fake documents and suitcases filled with random clothes. When we got there we went to a sketchy hotel and after 15 minutes he went to the bar. A bit after that, some guy just walks in. I was confused but he began muttering saying I was too pale and too old and he left. I called my dad but he didn't answer so I climbed out through the window and went to the police. They put me on a plane home that same hour. I don't really tell people because it's a bit of a crazy story and sounds made up, hence why it's here, but yet. I was almost named Storm because I was born at 3 AM in the middle of a massive tornado storm. 1 touchdown actually a few minutes after I was born. I was also essentially dead. Docs thought they were going to lose both me and my mom, but somehow I lived beaches. I am blind. Many online commenters think that I am lying. If I wanna lie, I would rather tell everyone that I am a rich traveler. A horse threw me in the air when I was a child, but I wasn't on his back. He grabbed the skin of my back with his teeth and yeeted me. I never graduated high school but I have a bachelor's degree. I was homeschooled and my mom never went through the legal steps to actually get me a real diploma. So she made one in Photoshop that was then used to get me into this podunk community college that didn't verify it. From there I got my associate's degree, which I then used to get into a decent university where I got my bachelor's. I homeschooled and didn't have a legit transcript when I applied for college. I made one on my computer. They accepted it. I was shocked. I can smell some illnesses and chronic symptoms. My sense of smell is normally pretty average, but I can sometimes smell if a person is sick before they start showing symptoms, and have been able to predict 2 seizures, a diabetic blood sugar drop, and multiple chronic migraines before they happened. My great-grandfather worked in the textile business and started importing rayon fabric from Japan in the late 60s and 70s. Keep in mind this was during the early days of synthetic fabrics and traveling to Japan was not all that common. On a business trip, he met some Japanese businessmen who were selling newly designed transistor radios. His contacts wanted to set up an exclusive import agreement for their electronics to North America, but my great-grandfather declined. Because how many of these radios could you possibly sell? Turns out that was a short-sighted business decision. Because that company was called Sony Electronics, he turned down the exclusive import contract for Sony. On the other side of my family, my Canadian relatives walked away from 100 acres of land in Alberta during the Dust Bowl and Great Depression. They decided it was not worth paying the taxes on their land. Turns out that land was right in the heart of the Alberta oil deposits. Also on my mother's side of the family, they used to have a citrus orchard near Los Angeles. They sold it cheap to some land developers. That farm was right at Hollywood and Vine. My family on both sides is bad at seeing long-term investments. I once drove a locomotive backwards through the Canadian Rockies. I died first, and then was born. I've told this story a few times on Reddit, but I enjoy telling it, so here we go again. During the cesarean to bring me into the world, there was some major complication on my mother's end. She started bleeding internally, drowning me in the womb. When I was removed, the doctors tried to get me breathing but couldn't. I was declared dead. My mother was still unconscious, but my dad was brought in to say goodbye to me. He held me in his arms, was saying goodbye when out of nowhere I started coughing up blood and screaming as babies do. Apparently it was the weirdest moment in his life, being abjectly terrified and overwhelmed with joy that I was alive. It's my favorite story to tell, because weirdly it takes some pressures off on birthdays. I don't do well with too much attention by family friends, but celebrating my death day doesn't bring people the same connotations. Grandma did genealogy of my family and proved we're related to Edgar Allan Poe. I grew up on the wrong side of the river, was considered by all to be the town loser, and went to work as a janitor while still in high school. Then, in my 40s I set a goal for myself, while still working full time, to take one class at a time until I either graduate or die, whichever comes first. At age 49 I finished my Bachelor's of Science degree, at age 52 my MBA, and age 61 my PhD. Never let the arrogant elitist define who you are or what you can be. My husband, I'm 30, has been my best friend since I was 7. He was the new kid at school and I walked up to him and said, "We are going to be best friends." He said, "No we aren't. Leave me alone." I bugged him every day for 2 weeks before he finally said, "If I'll be your friend, will you shut up about it?" We were married 20 years later. Proved his ass wrong. I built a 13-foot tall T-Rex with Christopher Walken's head, and New York Magazine called it highbrow and brilliant. My dad invented the Hamburglar. I survived a plane crash in the desert, trapped there for 2 days, and was rescued by 2 dudes who were trying to bet if they can cook an egg in the sand. Whoa, you made it to the end? You're a ducking beast. I'll cut you a deal. Smash like and subscribe for more curated content, bruh. It's free and that's a great price.